Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander. Episode 105, Family Reunion. Seleucus IV is dead, and honestly, it's felt a bit sudden even to me. However, he leaves behind him a difficult situation. His younger son has been proclaimed as king, possibly, by the minister Heliodorus, who is fresh off the murder of Seleucus IV. However, this new king is the younger son. The older one is squirreled away in Rome as a hostage. Let's see how this pans out in the next few months and years, shall we? As we saw in episode 103, Heliodorus was likely to have declared Antiochus as king. Following my own rules that rulers get regnal numbers if they rule without being junior king for their whole reign, this boy is now Antiochus IV. Note that he is not usually counted as such, and the numbering just skips over him to the next one. A fantastic omen of the many decades of glorious reign and conquest that are to come, I'm sure you agree. That said, just because Antiochus IV was king, it didn't mean he actually got any real power. The plan was that Heliodorus would pull all the strings and wield all the actual control. You may remember that Antiochus IV was born in about 180 BCE, as we discussed in episode 101. So, when his father died in 175 and Heliodorus took over the effective control of the government, our new king was about 5 years old. For his part, Heliodorus was content to just be the puppet master, not wanting to lose more than he would gain by actually taking a crown for himself. So, we have Antiochus IV now nominally in charge, with Heliodorus looming behind him, and his older brother Demetrius stored away as a political hostage in Rome. However, these aren't the only two Seleucids in our dynasty. I will now draw your attention back to Mithridates. Mithridates, if you remember, was the youngest son of Antiochus III, and hence the paternal, and also maternal, uncle of both Demetrius and Antiochus IV. Mithridates had been released from Roman control when the aforementioned Demetrius had been exchanged for him. At the time his older brother died, Mithridates was in Athens, on his way back from captivity in Rome. He was, in fact, a citizen of the city at this point, and had been elected to high office there in 175. This leads me to believe that maybe my statement from 2 episodes ago wasn't quite accurate, and Mithridates had in fact dawdled in getting back home. News now reached Athens, and thus Mithridates, that Seleucus IV was dead and Heliodorus had effectively taken over. To explain what happened next, we need to bring Eumenes II of Pergamon back into our story. Seleucus IV had not managed to heal the divide between the Seleucids and Pergamon during his rule, and Edwin Bevan points to Seleucus's conduct during the recent Anatolian War as evidence. We covered this war in episode 102, in case you need a refresher. However, Seleucus IV was now dead. For his part, Eumenes II got on well with Prince Mithridates, and could see the benefits of thrusting his ally into the Seleucid limelight. So, he offered military support to Mithridates should the prince want to take over control of the government for himself. Just hypothetically. Mithridates accordingly set out from Athens and crossed into Anatolia. There, he met with an army from Pergamon, and Eumenes II and his brother Attalus accompanied Mithridates to the border with the Seleucid Empire along the royal road. An alliance was also signed between Mithridates and Pergamon. From there, he crossed over the Taurus Mountains and into Syria, declaring himself co-monarch, illegally, with his nephew. As Bevan notes, he had an uphill battle, with no doubt Heliodorus and supporters of the elder branch of the Seleucid family working against him. We don't know exactly what happened, But we do know that, alongside all of this, there was also an uprising in Lower Syria to try and annex the province back into Egypt, thereby undoing its conquest by Antiochus III. Through a combination of violence and intrigue, Mithridates took over control. Incidentally, Edwin Bevan quotes the Old Testament's book of Daniel in making this assertion, and I will no doubt have to do a tangent on the relevance of the said book of Daniel at some point. Trust me, it isn't going away while Mithridates is around. Heliodorus disappears at this point, and Mithridates was victorious, pushing Antiochus IV into the background. Then again, given how Heliodorus treated him, maybe it's more accurate to say he never emerged from said background. 5 years into his reign, so in about 170 or 169 BCE, Antiochus IV died. He would have been about 10 years old at the time and had nominally been in charge of the Seleucid Empire for 5 years. Wikipedia states that the death may have been at Mithridates' orders, while Edwin Bevan confidently asserts that the uncle was in fact responsible for his nephew's death, using a killer whom he later distanced himself from. This killer was called Andronicus, and bumped off Antiochus IV before himself being killed by the new sovereign. Incidentally, speaking of this new sovereign, we can now stop referring to our prince as Mithridates at this point. Either now, or way earlier when his oldest brother died, he began using a different name. This name is, of course it is, Antiochus. He is usually listed in histories as Antiochus IV, but, owing to our fresh new numbering system, we will be calling him Antiochus V. However, that is for the future. For now, we must recap the, very short, life of our Antiochus IV. That will be episode 106. In episode 107 and on, we will cover the life of Antiochus V. I promise that reign will be more eventful than this one. However, that will have to wait until next time. Until then, thank you all for listening. Feel free to get in touch with the show's email address if you have any questions or comments. And until next time, have a great week, everyone.